I'd now like to invite Bethwyn Serow to come out to the stage, and she is the Executive Director of the Australian Major Performing Arts Group and is going to speak a little further on the performing arts.
I think I'll go without. Hello, and thank you for inviting me today. And I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land in which we gather today, the Gadigal people, the Eora Nation, and to thank Larissa and her colleagues in the arts. I have to say I came through an education system that gave me very little grounding in our First Nations culture, and I have had such generosity over the more than 20 years that I've worked in arts and screen that has been enriching and humbling in the sense of how much the Indigenous culture can tell us about the importance of arts and culture. So I've been working in the arts and the screen sector in advocacy for over 20 years, and I've experienced some fantastic highs. The sector's values and needs have again aligned with government, and we've seen really ambitious, creative confidence. And then, at that time, it's thrilling. And we live in hope, and there's energy, and then things dissipate. So while arts are moving hearts and minds on the stage, when the curtain falls, we are often lamenting together of our maligned state, needing to continually prove its value, to call for a place at the policies table, and to be repeatedly thwarted with the arts as being seen as a nice, colourful activity that you do once more pressing matters have been addressed. And frankly, it's exhausting, and it's blocking our progress, and it's blocking us being a modern, dynamic society. That's not that I want to gripe, and it's not that I want to, it's just we have so much in this country and so much talent in creativity. There's so much more we could do. So Australia's benefited from the ubiquitous nature of the arts and the positive impacts it makes, and there's a whole shopping list, and you'd be very familiar with them across the faculties, from wellbeing and health to education, social cohesion, as Larissa's been talking about, placemaking, stimulating tourism and retail and stories, and our international brand and cultural diplomacy. I sometimes think if our shopping list was shorter, we'd be taken more seriously. That people think that we keep trying to find another argument for the value of the arts, but really, it's about our humanity and everything we do in every faculty and every part of our living work and social life has our creativity and our humanity in it. Federally, there have been some fantastic individual ministers and members of the backbench who acknowledge the value of the arts. However, there's very little cross-portfolio collaboration. We lack confident leadership and proactive investment to explore creativity and innovation in ways to advance our 21st century social and economic challenges with the arts. And our shared wellbeing and prosperity has been under-realised. And then came COVID. The performing arts was, as Larissa said, the first sector to experience the full force of social distancing, shutdown measures, and it will be the last to recover. All earned income dried up overnight, and much of the cash on hand is actually sales for future shows, which were to be cancelled, and the performances and the background work that we do offstage. So to give you an idea what that means, the 2018 Live Performance Australia's ticketing survey provides an indication of the scale of main stage refunds alone. These performing arts companies also do a lot of education, community development of artworks and experimentation, but were also cancelled. So the survey in 2018 recorded 26 million tickets to attendances, and that's more than the AFL, Rugby League, cricket, soccer, basketball and baseball tickets per year. The box office of the 8 major performing arts theatre companies alone in Australia generate more in earnings each year than the Australian feature film industry. Performing arts organisations use subscriptions and reserves to invest upfront. They carry significant financial risk. Some of our largest organisations have less than 10% subsidy, and returns are calculated over the annual season. And I think it helps to understand the structure of the sector to understand the impacts. So it does mean that one show cross-subsidise is another. So COVID cannibalised any notion of a balanced season, and for many, any season at all, and all the upfront investments were lost because our income expenditure is very lumpy. The ABS verified the size and speed of COVID impact. So in the week of the 30th of March, it estimated that 90% of businesses across the Australian economy were still operating. In the arts, but particularly in the performing arts, it was down to 47, making it the industry worst affected. The Grattan Institute estimated nationally 14 to 26% of jobs were being lost in the workforce, whereas in the arts sector, it was 50%. So what did they do and where did they start? One of the priorities was retaining their virtuous artistic knowledge of their ensembles and creative teams and keeping connections with their audience. Ensembles are quite critical to capacity building in the future, and they hold within them the art. A dancer at the Australian Ballet or at Sydney Dance Company holds works for over 5, 10, some of them 15 years. And the work that they do together is like a well-oiled team in a football league. You pick and choose your ensemble to complement and explore a certain style of expression. So holding on to the ensembles was very important. So reserves, flexibility from government on current grant deliverables and JobKeeper have supported some. But as Larissa alluded to, for the companies that don't have ensembles, which is most of them, particularly in theatre and dance, but most of them, none of their performers were able to access JobKeeper. They're on short-term contracts. And so there you had a theatre with no venue that could be opened and now no artists. It's a bit like coffee not being available at a cafe or hospitals without doctors. Where can you go with arts without artists? However, the deeper interconnection between the arts and the community, and we've talked about this today, I think the response of the Australian community in COVID has really shaped the nation. It reinforced that our tickets are not merely ticket sales. Many patrons willingly converted their tickets to either next year's season, showing faith that we would return, and many also turned their tickets into donations, gratefully received, both financially, but actually also the heart that it gave artists and performers and the organisations. Signed-up sponsors also stayed on board. They actually worked with companies to repurpose their sponsorship where they could. Some of that did support us going digitally online, or suspended their initiatives. And philanthropists provided emergency financial relief to artists slipping through the cracks. And this is just a little excerpt of Queensland Ballet's video, which I think captures the sentiment. Sorry,
This year is just beyond anything we've ever experienced. It's been
unsettling,
strange,
scary,
heartbreaking.
but knowing that you're standing with us has made a huge difference. You are our
Family.
friends, supporters.
inspiration, the reason that we dance.
We want you to know that we're working really hard every day.
And people across the sector also worked hard and are on reduced hours and reduced pay, but they are actually trying to pull work together to maintain that contact. And they're also doing shows to raise funds for the benevolent funds across the sector, both at Equity and Special Independent Artists. But of course, these are all stopgap. So a lot of my work in COVID was actually the lobbying and advocacy to the federal government. And we did announce a package of $250 million support arts package to COVID, which in June, which was really gratefully received. It wasn't considered enough, but it was fantastic to see that sort of partnership returning. That was 4 months in. We're now 7, moving to 8 months in, and we have not seen $1 come from that process. And many in the sector are arguing on all sides, from all traditions, that this is simply not good enough and that we are losing precious cultural commodities. So according to the ABS, accommodation and food services and arts and recreation centres are experiencing higher COVID unemployment than any other sector, which I think you might have seen in the news. But what's really interesting that the ABS has commented on, in arts and culture where there is employment, they're seeing that those employed people moving out of the sector. So we are now rapidly losing our talent, a combination of being the last to return and that we couldn't keep people attached to our organisations through JobKeeper in many cases. While many wonder why the government has been moving so slowly, there is heart. I'm not going to grizzle the whole time. Australians themselves have actually been increasingly engaging with the arts, embracing the arts. The Australia Council for the Arts Creating Our Future report was released during COVID in August, and it revealed Australians' recognition of the power and the value of arts has grown since 2016. A new statistic also notes that the arts build necessary skills for our workforce future. And just so you don't get thrown by the fact that the 2016 grey line looks a lot more than the blue to 19, that's because there's a different methodology, so you compare the light blue with the darker blue. Another report also released during COVID by the independent think tank New Approach focused on middle Australians. And they expressed very similar high levels of value recognition, agreeing that the arts and culture are a means of connecting communities and embracing our national identity, our Australian way of life, and that, I think this is ironic, that Australia would be an authoritarian or war-torn nation without it. The report also reinforced the importance for the arts for creativity for child development, but also for mental health and wellbeing. So while our financial stocks are down, the value we lost in this time of crisis, our social stocks have been growing. In lockdown, just over a third of Australians engaged in the arts online, and another third, who were surveyed early in the piece, said they weren't, but they'd like to know how. And of those who did, 19% said they were doing more online engagement with the arts more than they had previously. And for children, it was 48% more. And what was really interesting is 25% said they felt that they were more creative than before COVID. So we've given the nation a productivity boost there. ABC Classic Radio has also reported significant increase in its listeners to classic music and other programs. And in the major performing arts companies, who were my members, the arts education teams who pivoted online have reached schools and children that they've never had the resources to travel to before. Throughout COVID, the sector developed new digital skills and rich and varied content, but it was all on the fly. And as I come from the background of screen, I mean, the first thing I thought when I moved across into the performing arts is great, we can pull this all together and there's a whole lot more experimentation we can do. But in fact, the time and the investment is not there to make it possible on any scale. So in effect, the crisis found us the time, whether we wanted it or not, and the ingenuity, and I say actually the resilience in the sector led to some amazing digital pivots. Malthouse, for example, created digital packages and sent it out to all the cast that were hoping to work through in the year with instructions of how to make your own videos and podcasts at home. So there were all these sort of quick responses. We had digital choirs, some of you had play readings, interviews. And for the artists that weren't on JobKeeper, the companies that had some reserves also tried to create little projects where they could call artists in to work at a distance. Maybe it was 3 musicians apart in a studio to record some performances. And I have to say the ABC stepped up, and I don't think enough acknowledgement yet has been given to the ABC of what they have done for the arts. They actually announced very early that they would make a deliberate decision to program more Australian music on radio and to provide any facilities they could to co-host artists, virtual festivals and events. Now, the Griffin lock-in was really interesting. That was a partnership with Google, and I've only seen one of the performances, there were 5, but they basically got writers, they gave them a week to write a play, but the play was going to be performed live where the audience could interact through chat, and depending on the prompts of the audience would change the shape of the play. And really what they were trying to do, we had a lot of what I would say is the broadcasting model of content, but what they were really trying to do now is experiment in other ways in which you could capture the live. Because we all celebrate the extra reach, but we also know that in person, meeting together has a very different dynamic. And today being here in this terrific space and hearing people and seeing expressions close up is a lot better than my lounge room. But hopefully this investment will continue because actually there is really very little crossover between the screen sector, digital innovation and the performing arts. Even though we rely often on the same actors, there's crossovers sometimes with our writers, and it's been shown that feature films that are based on plays often do better at the box office. So we've got all this relationship, but we don't have this innovation sort of, I'd say the weave is not there yet. But that's why the work that has been done in this digital space by a couple of examples I have here is quite exciting. Going online has required us to have a special agreement between Live Performance Australia, which is the main peak body for producers, production companies and the sector, and the union Equity. So we have a special digital rights agreement, which has meant that the rights and clearance fees have been reduced during COVID. So that's been great to give access, but of course we know that actors and the creation of content and livelihoods do not survive on goodwill alone, and we do need to monetise some of this. So the previous example there was Melbourne Digital Concert Hall. 2 young artists on the fly again in March created this digital concert proposition, and the model was simple. $20 for a ticket, that $20 all up went to the artist. $4 booking fee, that paid for everything else, the technicians and the software to program it. In the first 2 months, they raised $100,000 and they thought it was terrific. Last week, they'd raised $750,000. They've provided income to 350 artists. They've had 175 concerts, and 40% of their viewers don't attend in person, either because they have young children, their health issues, they live too far out, their work demands. And we're hoping that this will maintain another type of engagement. And Sydney Dance Company, who I have here, they were one of the first to go online with this offering of dance classes at home. So they had the ensemble of artists, but one of the important things is that artists gain energy and purpose and an understanding of themselves often through performing. And one of the big challenges was maintaining elite artists, not psychologically, but heart and creativity in such an austere situation. So while the Sydney Dance Company, who were about to open a new international first program three days after the COVID lockdown, they ended up turning the ensemble into dance teachers, which was a learning curve for themselves, and I think they really appreciated what a lot of their colleagues had been doing in the previous program. But they have actually made good living and revenue, which has actually sustained the company in a way they didn't expect. But they also had some international artists who also aren't eligible for anything, and some of that money went to their colleagues to support them. So incredible problem-solving stories are not just in the arts. Creativity is not the sole domain of artists, of the cultural industries, but creativity is critical to the arts, and the arts nurtures our creativity. Now, Oakville Australia's CEO, David Fox, wrote in his recent federal COVID arts submission, "Finding new solutions to a long-standing challenge is only possible because our people have been influenced to think outside the box. They've been inspired to push the envelope, and it comes back to having proximity and exposure to the transformational thinking that the arts invites." So data released last month on the creative industries measures the share of GDP as being 6.3% and a value of $115.1 million. It's got a 10-year growth of 34% and $88.1 billion in gross value add. Sorry, I did didn't do the graphs. So these are not bad figures. The arts and recreation services themselves reported 6.8% growth, a little bit higher, and the turnover and 8% growth in employment. That's 216,000 jobs directly, and we know there's other creative jobs in other industries. In fact, arts and recreation was the highest job growth before COVID to hospitals and healthcare and social services. And I'm sure they've had a lot more growth in COVID than we have. But it shows that it's a very fertile place and where we can gain economic benefits. The creative arts as a whole generated more jobs than mining, finance, utilities and information, media and technology sectors. And in fact, in the UK in 2018, their creative industries grew 5 times faster than the rest of their economy. So the performing arts is actually quite small within that. They've generated 4.3 billion, representing a 37% growth over 10 years, slightly ahead of creative industries, but they carry within them that pure experimentation and the sort of boundless possibilities of creativity that we see as being a bit like a furnace. This is a terrific pyramid that came from the UK, our colleagues in the UK, which just was explaining that the economic value of the arts is more than its direct inputs, outputs. The arts generate secondary retail hospitality activity, external demand, all the expenditures within the country, and they also empowering a lot of interconnections that we can foster in our recovery. Up until five years to 2017, the international arts tourism made up 43% of all international tourism and was growing faster than the rest of tourism, and arts tourists spend more. Now, we know they're not coming for a little while yet, but the domestic tourism, another report that came in COVID, it felt like COVID was raining on reports about the arts just when we weren't able to work. The domestic growth in arts tourism, both day trips and overnight, has also been encouraging. So since 2014, day trips have grown by 14%, and since 2013, and overnight by 20%. And again, guess what? The tourist spends more money. The core nighttime economy has been shattered by COVID. We know that there's concern about our silent, empty cities. And the arts have a role to play here. Historically, the nighttime economy has grown faster than the rest of the economy, and the arts are a crucial driver to bring people into the bars, into the city. Importantly, arts engagement is not merely about the economic hook, in case you think that it's all about putting some fancy colours on and then going down for the deal. It's not. It's really about attracting people in an impactful way and invites connection beyond the market or the economic realm by delivering support to that growth. So this weekend just gone, there's an amazing festival in Western Australia called Good Day Sunshine Bustleton Music Festival. Oh, I've gone backwards, sorry. This was really interesting because they basically got a car rotator in a showroom and they put their band on there, and then they segmented the big oval into 4 parts, and you couldn't cross over into different parts. And so they managed to have a crowd of up to 5,000. I did check, and I know 2 segments were sold out. And they've had the first mass gathering, and it's the first one that we know of internationally, and it went well. Melbourne Fringe is delivering performance art via letterboxes, by the telephone. You can ring up an artist and give them any problem you have in your life or professional life, and the artist will provide you with an artistic solution. Don't know how much you will take on that. And circus and dance, with their reliance on body and touch, of course, have had to adapt. So they're creating distance. One more page. They're developing work that is not relying on touch at the moment, whereas we've got in opera questions about whether opera will be able to come back at the size and scale that we've had in the past for a very long time. And symphonies, they can't program Mahler or Rachmaninoff, because it's just too big. We can't fit those artists on the stage. We need that space. So we're going to see a change in what we program. We can't fly in international artists, which symphonies in particular, and sometimes the ballets and operas rely on. So again, it will be Australian artists, but it'll also be arts in smaller spaces. Sydney Symphony is bringing some of the Australian artists who are not able to work in Europe home to Sydney and actually programming. So it's sort of the sliver of a silver lining. So after all this, the sector still continues to pivot, but it is fragile. People are depleted, and it's not only the financial gaps in the ecology that need attention, and we really need to start building the central role of First Nations arts and culture, but also the sustainability of their practice and engagement. We also need to provide professional opportunities for minority cultures in Australia to build career paths in the arts, and there were also art form gaps before this. JobsKeeper extension in March helps, but it will end in March and we won't be back to full capacity. And philanthropy is expected to drop by 30% in 2021. A survey on national confidence in coming to the theatre has said nationally 29% of people are ready to go to the theatre when they're told it's safe to do so. 29 is not a very big number. And in comparison, audiences are quite happy to eat at their local restaurant, 85%, go to their gym, 53%, or go on a plane interstate, 48%. So we're seeing many different scenarios play out in the different states, but we're interconnected. We often do co-productions that the borders have stopped us being able to do, and the economies of scale that would give us. And we know that we're only one incident away from closure. So even as we open, we know our sector remains at the highest risk of being closed. And we rely on everyone to get it right. And finally, in 2019, the UN General Assembly declared 2021 as the International Year of the Creative Economy for Sustainable Development. Our closest neighbour, Indonesia, took it to the meeting, and Australia was a supporter of it. So, as a country, there is much to do. We've seen communities unify, and we've talked about this today. We have seen systematic failures, inadequate protections, and some othering of our vulnerable people and disconnection of minority cultures to our broader cultural conversations. Addressing our mental health, education disengagement, our people's confidence, reinvigorating our cities, increasing sustainable industries as we pursue economic growth and job creation are key challenges. And we need to ask, is the old playbook where the arts are something you do at the end of the day fit for purpose, or can we do better?